Chat study. Study more. Study forever. Not because the world requires it of you. Not because society applauds it. But because your soul withers without it. Because the mind, once lit with the fire of curiosity, becomes a furnace of destiny. And destiny does not arrive at your doorstep in silence. It must be earned, provoked, summoned through thought, through effort, through relentless self-evolution. The average man studies to pass an exam. The uncommon man studies to pass through mediocrity. If you want to get rich, if you want to build something eternal, if you want to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I made something of this life, then you must marry the act of study. Not for a degree, but for direction. Not for applause, but for awareness. Not for recognition, but for revelation. Every minute you spend learning is a minute you trade for power. Power over ignorance. Power over reaction. Power over your own impulses. Let others wait for inspiration. You'll be busy collecting understanding. Because once you understand, you no longer beg for motivation. You operate with precision. Study is the practice of mental discipline. And discipline is the door that leads to every treasure. You want wealth? Then discipline your thoughts. You want respect? Then discipline your words. You want freedom? Then discipline your habits. And where does discipline begin? It begins with study. Daily, deliberate, sometimes difficult, always worth it. When I say study, I don't mean scroll. I don't mean passively consuming noise disguised as wisdom. I mean grab a book that humbles you. Sit with a lecture that challenges you. Wrestle with an idea that forces you to question who you've been and who you could become. Study is not memorization. It is transformation. It is bending the iron of ignorance into the sword of insight. You don't study to sound smart. You study to become unshakable. And when you become unshakable, the storms of life don't break you, they reveal you. How do you change your income? Study your attitude. Study your posture. Study your language. How do you improve your relationships? Study yourself first. Study how you speak, how you listen, how you blame, how you avoid. The person who studies their own patterns is the person who rewrites their future. Most people are reactive. They stumble through life like leaves in the wind, pushed around by the opinions of others, by the next crisis, by the next distraction. But the person who studies has an anchor. They are not thrown off by turbulence. They've trained their mind to find signal in the noise. And when you commit to this, to studying yourself, the world, ideas, principles, failures, great minds, ancient texts, modern science, you begin to stack bricks where others leave dust. 1 hour a day compounds. A year from now, you'll be unrecognizable. Not because you read everything, but because you read the right thing. You listened. You took notes. You challenged what you heard. And most importantly, you acted on what you learned. Study alone is not power. Studied action is. The purpose of study is to inform your movement, to add fire to your ambition and clarity to your chaos. Now you say, but I'm too old. No, you're not. You're too conditioned to think growth stops at a certain age. But the soul never stops yearning. The brain, if challenged, adapts. And the man or woman who makes a lifelong friend of learning becomes a living revolution. Every day, you're either decaying or developing. There is no neutral. So ask yourself, what did I study today that made me wiser than I was yesterday? If the answer is nothing, then life is passing you by while you sleep with your eyes open. Wake up. Read what matters. Listen to people who make you think, not just feel. Write your thoughts. Dissect your behaviors. Get curious again. Your future depends on the questions you're willing to ask yourself today. Some people chase money but never study how it works. Some want love but never study what love demands. Some want freedom but never study their own addictions. And so they wander confused, frustrated, blaming the system, blaming others, blaming fate. But those who study, those who learn how systems work, how emotions form, how history echoes those people, begin to see the game behind the game. And when you see the game, you don't complain about it. You learn how to win it. The most dangerous man in any room is not the loudest. It's the one who has studied in silence for years. Because he sees what others miss. He doesn't react, he responds. He doesn't follow trends, he follows principles. And principles are rare in a world addicted to immediacy. But study makes you rare. It makes you precise. It sharpens your perception like a blade. So don't study for approval. Study to develop thinking. Because when you can think, really think, you can outmaneuver fear, outgrow your past, and outbuild any obstacle. Thinking is not wishing. Thinking is not worrying. Thinking is the discipline of mind applied to reality. It's the art of seeing causes, not just effects. It's training your mind to ask better questions, to pause before reacting, to zoom out when others zoom in. Thinking is not just analysis, it's courage. Courage to face your contradictions, your laziness, your assumptions. And that's why most avoid it. But those who confront themselves through study are reborn through understanding. And that rebirth is what makes you powerful beyond measure. Let others gamble on luck. You'll gamble on literacy, on strategy, on internal growth. Study more than just your field. Study your fears. Study your excuses. Study your morning routine. Study what triggers your insecurity. Study your thinking patterns when you're tired, or angry, or discouraged. Because real mastery doesn't begin with external performance, it begins with internal awareness. And internal awareness comes from study. Not once, but again and again. Study forever, because life doesn't stop teaching. So you must never stop learning. Now, breathe in that truth. Let it settle. Let it confront every part of you that has settled for less than you're capable of. Because once you start thinking, truly thinking, the world opens up. Not instantly, not easily, but relentlessly. Doors you thought were sealed begin to creak. People you thought were beyond reach start to notice. Opportunities, invisible before, begin to form in the shadows. Because study trains you to see what most are too distracted to notice. It makes your mind a magnet for solutions, for insights, for advantage. And once the world opens to a thinking mind, it cannot close again. You will never be the same. Because now, every conversation becomes a classroom. Every failure becomes a textbook. Every pain becomes a professor. You begin to study everything. You study people not to judge them, but to understand them. You study your setbacks not to resent them, but to extract wisdom from them. You study your own patterns not to condemn yourself, but to reprogram yourself. And that is where greatness begins. Not in motivation, not in luck, but in the quiet act of relentless, intentional study. Study humbles you. Study reminds you that you don't know everything, but it also reminds you that you can learn anything. And that balance is power. The ego resists study because it fears the mirror. It fears being shown what it lacks. But the wise man craves that mirror. He says, "Show me where I'm blind so I can see. Show me where I'm weak so I can grow. Show me what I missed so I can build what others can't." Study is not an academic ritual. It's a spiritual revolution. Because to study is to say to the universe, "I am not done becoming." The man who studies is the man who refines. He does not chase noise. He tunes into signal. He doesn't need the world to slow down. He trains himself to speed up internally, to process with depth, to think in layers, to observe without bias. This is why few reach high levels of achievement, because few are willing to study past the point of comfort. But that's where the gold is. That's where understanding turns into command. And once you command your thoughts, you command your life. The man who cannot sit alone and think cannot build anything that lasts. Think of the greatest minds in history. Einstein, Da Vinci, Newton, Franklin, Mandela, Carnegie. What did they have in common? They studied not just books, but behavior. Not just ideas, but outcomes. They studied the world until it revealed its gears, and then they bent those gears with thought, with intention, with persistence. They weren't born different. They became different. And how? Through study, through disciplined thinking, through inner work, through a refusal to drift, because drifting is the opposite of study. Drifting is mental laziness disguised as freedom. But real freedom comes from understanding. And understanding comes from disciplined attention. The man who reads with focus sees what others scroll past. The woman who journals daily sees patterns that others are blind to. The leader who studies psychology doesn't manipulate, he elevates. Because study reveals how to build with integrity. It shows you the levers of influence, of trust, of impact. And once you see those levers, you can choose to build something that lasts beyond you. You can choose to get rich not by chasing income, but by developing insight. Because money follows value, and value follows awareness, and awareness comes from study. Study your market. Study your craft. Study your behavior under pressure. Study what makes people say yes. What makes people feel seen. What makes an idea spread. When you study like this, you rise above the noise. You no longer beg for permission, you move with clarity. You no longer fear competition, you become the benchmark. But here's the key. Study must become a lifestyle, not an event. You don't study for an hour and then return to distraction. You breathe study. You eat with a question on your mind. You walk with a podcast in your ears. You listen to people not to respond, but to understand. You build reflection into your routine. You don't waste the silence between moments, you use it to think. You turn car rides into classrooms. You make solitude your sanctuary, because every minute matters when you are sculpting a mind that can't be stopped. Study yourself before the world studies you. Because if you don't define your own identity through reflection, someone else will define it for you. And most people will get it wrong. And they'll see your past, not your potential. They'll judge your failures, not your fire. They'll limit your possibilities based on their own fears. But when you study who you truly are, when you go deep, when you ask hard questions, when you confront your patterns, you begin to operate from truth, not image. And truth, when internalized, is an unstoppable engine. You can't fake studied thinking. It shows. It shows in how you move through conflict, in how you carry yourself when no one's watching, in how you respond to temptation, rejection, exhaustion. A mind that has studied itself does not react like a slave to emotion. It pauses. It chooses. It leads. And that pause, that split second of studied control, that's what separates the average from the extraordinary. Because success is not one giant leap. It's thousands of studied moments stacked like bricks. Now let me ask you, what are you studying today? What are you feeding your mind when no one is watching? Are you consuming thoughtlessly, or are you cultivating thought? Are you filling your head with noise, or are you sculpting a mind of clarity, precision, and vision? Because the future does not belong to the entertained. It belongs to the educated. And I don't mean classroom education, I mean soul education. The kind of learning that burns, the kind that humbles, the kind that changes how you walk, how you think, how you build. Some people wait for life to teach them with pain. But the wise person studies before the storm. They prepare before the crisis. They seek wisdom before they need it. Because when the winds of life blow, it's too late to wish you'd studied. Preparation is your power. Discipline is your shield. And thinking is your sword. So sharpen your mind now, while others are sleeping. Build your foundation now, while others are scrolling. Because when the test comes, and it will, you'll be ready. Not because you hoped, but because you studied. Study is the quiet rebellion. It's the act of saying, I will not be average. I will not drift. I will not outsource my destiny. It is the seed of all freedom, all wealth, all power. And it is available to you right now, in this moment. You don't need permission to open a book. You don't need approval to observe your own behavior. You don't need credentials to learn from life. All you need is hunger. Hunger to grow. Hunger to change. Hunger to think at a higher level than the environment that raised you. This hunger will save you when emotion fails you. This hunger will push you when fatigue tempts you. This hunger will keep you climbing when comfort begs you to stop. Because the deeper your study, the clearer your why. And the clearer your why, the stronger your how. That is how empires are built. That is how legacies are carved. Not by hoping, not by waiting, but by studying, by thinking, by becoming undeniable from the inside out. And if you ever find yourself lost in doubt, lost in pressure, lost in a storm, don't look outward first. Look inward. Ask, what have I stopped studying? Because the moment you stop studying, you start sinking. But the moment you start again, even with one idea, one insight, one page, you rise. Because study is resurrection. Every time you study, you are reborn into a better version of yourself, stronger, sharper, wiser. And no one can take that from you. And as you rise, as you evolve through study, something begins to change in your very presence. People feel it before they can name it. A certain clarity in your eyes, a weight in your words, a stillness in your movement. That is what studied thinking produces, not just knowledge, but authority, not just facts, but presence. You walk into a room and you don't have to shout to be noticed. You don't have to boast to be respected. The discipline you have carved into your thinking speaks before you do. You become a person who doesn't just know things, you understand things. You don't just have answers, you ask better questions. You don't just exist, you expand. And that is what separates a life of survival from a life of significance. Study doesn't just prepare you for opportunity, it turns you into the opportunity. Others seek motivation, you become it. Others wait for direction, you provide it. Others run from pressure. You stand in it, unmoved, because you've studied how to breathe through the fire. You've studied your fear. You've studied your pain. You've studied the game of life from the inside out. And now you build from a place of vision, not reaction. And vision, once backed by thought and discipline, is the most powerful force on earth. So when others are distracted, study. When others are celebrating mediocrity, study. When others are giving up, disappearing, complaining, study. Because study is not about the now, it is an investment in the future version of you that is too strong, too intelligent, too prepared to be denied. You are building a mind that will not panic in the dark, a soul that will not bow when it's tested, a voice that will not shake when it speaks the truth. That is what study creates, not perfection, but power. The power to remain grounded when the world is spinning, the power to discern when others react, the power to create in the face of chaos. And that power, that internal, unshakable, earned power, is the only kind that matters. Because wealth without wisdom collapses, success without understanding crumbles. Popularity without inner clarity becomes poison. But when you study yourself, study principles, study history, study how reality actually works, then every achievement rests on bedrock. You can lose everything and rebuild twice as fast. You can face the storm and say, I've seen this before. Because you didn't wing your way through life. You studied your way through it. And now you are dangerous. Dangerous not because of aggression, but because of awareness. Because you cannot be manipulated, you cannot be distracted, you cannot be sold comfort because you've studied what comfort costs. You've studied what giving up produces. You've studied what delayed action becomes in 5 years and you decided not to pay that price. Study gives you foresight. It sharpens your intuition. It clears the fog off your mirror. So now you don't just react to life, you design it. You don't just hope for results, you engineer them. Because your mind is no longer a wandering passenger. It's a trained pilot. And that's the truth. You are either a wandering thought or a deliberate thinker. You are either echoing the world or carving your own mental architecture. There is no in-between. And the quality of your life depends entirely on the quality of your thinking. What you tolerate, what you attract, what you build, what you destroy, it all flows from thought. And thought is built through study, repetition, exposure, struggle, reflection, correction, daily, deliberate, devoted. Let this be the hour you make the decision not just to study, but to become a student of life itself, a student of purpose, a student of mastery. Don't study to be clever, study to be clear. Don't study to impress, study to transform. Don't study to collect knowledge, study to apply wisdom. Let your study bleed into your habits, your speech, your focus, your energy, your relationships. Because the highest form of learning is not retention, it's embodiment. You'll know you've studied enough when your presence becomes your proof. When people say, there's something about you, but they can't quite name it. It's the way you think, the way you move, the way you don't fold under pressure, the way you breathe in silence. That's study. That's what happens when you choose to go deeper than the noise. And it's always a choice, because the easy road is loud and full of crowds. But the road of study? That's a quiet mountain trail. Fewer people, fewer distractions. But the view? The view is divine. And up there, when you've paid the price in thought, in solitude, in reflection, something unlocks. You see yourself clearly. You see the path clearly. And most importantly, you see what matters clearly. You stop chasing trends. You stop reacting to every wave. You become immovable in your conviction. That's not arrogance, that's clarity. Clarity purchased through the currency of attention, focus, and humble learning. And once you have clarity, no storm can confuse you. So study. Study more. Study forever. Study not because you're weak, but because you are committed to becoming stronger. Study not because you're behind, but because you are building a future the average cannot comprehend. Study not because someone told you to, but because you are finally listening to the voice inside you that knows you were made for more. That voice isn't asking for success, it's asking for alignment. And you find alignment through thinking. Deep thinking, honest thinking, disciplined, consistent, grounded thinking. That's what separates a life of impact from a life of imitation. Impact demands depth, and depth demands study. This world is not changed by shallow minds chasing shallow things. It is changed by those who choose to go deeper, deeper into themselves, deeper into principles, deeper into purpose. And you have that choice today. Will you scroll again, or will you study? Will you avoid discomfort, or will you master it? Will you wish, or will you work? Because here's the final truth. Your life is already studying you. Every day, it studies your responses, your patterns, your attention, your actions, your priorities, and it reflects them back to you. Your results are a mirror of your study habits. If you don't like what you see, change what you study, shift what you focus on. Feed your mind something worthy of the life you say you want. Study not just to learn, but to evolve, to rise, to lead, to create a life that demands explanation. So don't stop, don't slow, don't settle. Study, study more, study forever. Study until your thinking is no longer controlled by fear. Study until your words carry weight. Study until your presence changes the room. Study until your life becomes the proof that study works. Because when the mind is lit, the world bows to it, not in submission, but in recognition. The universe responds to a sharpened mind, like a key sliding into the right lock, doors open. And not just doors of opportunity, but doors within you, doors to courage, doors to direction, doors to ideas that had been buried beneath layers of apathy and fear. The man who studies doesn't just navigate life, he designs it. He doesn't just react to the chaos of the world, he rises above it with thought as his shield and clarity as his sword. This is the secret the world won't shout at you. The mind, once trained, becomes a force beyond imagination. It outpaces talent, it outlasts luck, it outperforms charm, and it builds something more powerful than anything bought or borrowed. It builds character. The kind of character that doesn't crack when tested. The kind that walks through uncertainty with calm, through temptation with resolve, through delay with patience. And that is what study builds, not just knowledge, but architecture. You begin constructing a self that will not collapse, no matter the weight it must carry. And what is wealth, if not the byproduct of a well-constructed self? Money is not the beginning. It is the consequence. The fruit, not the root. And the root must be thought. Disciplined, studied, refined thought. That is how you plant something that doesn't die with winter. That is how you grow results that don't vanish with the trends. People think riches come from hustle. But hustle without thought is just noise. You can move fast and still be going in circles. But when your hustle is backed by a studied mind, now you move with aim. Now every hour has direction. Now your energy compounds. That's how fortunes are built. You don't need more motivation. You need more insight. You don't need louder cheerleaders. You need deeper understanding, and that comes from study. When you study how wealth is created, not fantasized, but truly created, you begin to see patterns. Patterns in behavior, patterns in leverage, patterns in timing. And suddenly, you're not guessing anymore, you're calculating. You're not wishing anymore, you're aligning. And when your actions align with reality, results follow like a shadow. But you must be willing to go beyond the surface. Study not just what people do, but why they do it. Study not just success, but the mindset beneath it. Study not just failure, but the hidden decisions that led to it. The truth is always deeper than it looks. And study is the shovel. Study is how you dig beneath your assumptions, how you unearth buried beliefs, how you tear apart excuses with precision. The world says, you can't. Study says, let's find out. The world says, be realistic. Study says, define reality on your terms. The world says, that's just how it is. But a mind trained by study knows that's how it's been, not how it has to be. So what are you feeding your mind today? What questions are you asking yourself? Because the man who asks poor questions gets poor answers. But the one who studies his way into better questions, he gets access to better possibilities. Life becomes a reflection of the questions you dare to explore. Don't ask, how can I survive this month? Ask, how can I build a system that prints wealth for decades? Don't ask, how do I feel better? Ask, what habits are causing these feelings? Don't ask, why does this always happen to me? Ask, what am I doing that's making it inevitable? That's what study does. It upgrades your questions. And upgraded questions lead to upgraded outcomes. You want to become rare? Study what others ignore. Study silence. Study solitude. Study how to think when no one is around to impress. Study how to delay gratification when your old self is screaming for comfort. Study how to hold your tongue when you want to lash out. Study how to persist when your emotions are betraying you. Because that's where greatness is not in the grand gestures, but in the invisible victories. Study sharpens those victories until they become habits. Habits that turn into standards. Standards that turn into results. And soon, you'll look back at the person you used to be, the one who hesitated, who complained, who waited, and you'll barely recognize them. Not because time passed, but because thought evolved. Because you studied your way out of mediocrity. You studied your way into mastery. You earned your new self, and no one can steal what you've become. No economy can take it. No critic can dismantle it. No failure can erase it. Because it's built on the inside. And what's built on the inside endures. So make a vow, a quiet vow. Not to anyone else, just to yourself. A vow to study until your future self shakes your hand and says, thank you. Thank you for not quitting. Thank you for questioning everything. Thank you for becoming the kind of person I am proud to be. Study until you no longer need applause, because results speak louder. Study until you stop craving shortcuts, because you've seen what discipline delivers. Study until your life becomes the loudest voice in the room. Not by volume, but by example. Because the man who studies becomes the man who shapes outcomes, shapes destinies, shapes futures. Be that man, be that woman, be that soul that refused to sleepwalk through life. Be the thinker in the age of noise. Be the learner in the era of arrogance. Be the one who stayed humble enough to ask, what am I missing? And strong enough to say, I will find out. That's how you win, quietly, daily, relentlessly. Not just with force, but with study. And when the final chapter of your life is written, let it be said, here lived a person who didn't wait for the world to teach them. They taught themselves. They studied their way into clarity. They studied their way into power. They studied their way into peace. And because they did, they lit the way for others. Study. Study more. Study forever. Study to develop thinking. Study because your future is too important to leave unprepared. Study because your mind is your most powerful weapon. And the day you stop sharpening it, the world starts dulling it. But not you. Not anymore. Now rise and read. Reflect. Refine. Rebuild. Reclaim your mind. Reclaim your fire. Reclaim your future. And never stop studying.